If you have between $2 and $10 million saved, and you're either approaching retirement or already living in it, there is one account on your statement that almost every advisor underuses, misunderstands, or flat out ignores. It's your boring, regular taxable brokerage account. And when it's used correctly, and I mean truly correctly, with the tax code in one hand and a withdrawal plan in the other, it can function almost identically to a Roth IRA, meaning the gains come out federally tax-free. I call it the Pseudo-Roth. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the Pseudo-Roth strategy, how the tax code actually treats this account, walk you through a real client case study on screen with the numbers, and detail the 4 execution mistakes that turned this strategy from a $1 million win into a 6-figure disaster. And stay with me until the end. If you have money in a brokerage account, this is the most valuable conversation you can have before you start spending down a portfolio. I'm Ryan Knoll, founder of NavWealth Partners. We work with families who've already done the hard part. They saved, they invested, they built real generational level wealth. The problem is, every piece of advice they got on the way up, max your 401k, defer the tax, keep buying, was the right advice for the accumulation phase. Retirement flips the game. In retirement, the question isn't how do I grow this faster? The question is how do I keep the IRS out of my pocket on the way out for the next 30 years? And then how do I keep the IRS away when my money goes to my kids? That's where the brokerage account stops being an afterthought and becomes the single most powerful tool in your retirement toolkit. Let me prove it to you line by line. Let's start with the belief that breaks everything. Almost every retiree I sit down with says some version of the same sentence. If I sell stock in my brokerage account, I owe tax on the gain. That sentence is the single most expensive misconception in retirement planning. It costs American retirees billions of dollars in unnecessary tax every year. It costs individual families hundreds of thousands of dollars over retirement. And worse than that, it scares people away from their best, most flexible, tax-efficient account, pushing them to drain the wrong buckets first. The truth is this. Long-term capital gains are not taxed like ordinary income. They have their own bracket system, their own rates, their own rules. In the bottom bracket, the one most retirees can deliberately sit in if they plan accordingly, is the 0% bracket. And that's not a typo. It's the federal tax code written in plain English, in the same publication your accountant has on his shelf right now. 0 federal tax. So let me walk you through how it actually works. The U.S. tax code treats 2 types of income completely differently. This is the foundation of everything else I'm about to show you, so you need to understand this part. Ordinary income is your wages, your business income, interest from bonds, and critically every dollar that comes out of a traditional IRA or 401k. It's taxed at the regular federal brackets that top out at 37%. Long-term capital gains are the profits on investments you've held for more than 1 year. They get their own bracket structure entirely. And those brackets are far more generous. Here are the long-term capital gains brackets for a married couple filing jointly. 0% on long-term gains up to about $98,900 of taxable income. 15% from there up to roughly $614,000. 20% above that. For a single filer, those numbers are $49,450 at 0% and $545,000 at the upper end of the 15% line. Now layer on the standard deduction. For a married couple, both under 65, the standard deduction in 2026 is around $32,200. That deduction comes off the top before you calculate taxable income. So here's the math nobody runs for you. A married couple, both under age 65 with 0 other income, can realize approximately $131,100 of long-term capital gains in a single calendar year and owe nothing to the federal government on the way of taxes. Now, most retirees don't have 0 other income. They have Social Security, maybe a pension, maybe some required distributions from an IRA. So the actual tax-free harvest number is lower for most people. But it's still meaningful. For a typical couple in our practice pulling Social Security of $60,000 combined with a modest IRA withdrawal, they can still realize $40,000 to $70,000 of long-term capital gains every year at 0 federal tax. Every single year for 30 years. That is the engine of the Pseudo-Roth strategy. Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay Ryan, the 0% bracket is great, but I've got a 401k, I've got an IRA, I've got a Roth, I've got cash. Why is the brokerage account specifically the centerpiece of the whole strategy? Why not one of the others? The answer comes down to one word: control. Every other account in your retirement comes with rules baked in by the IRS or by Congress. Your traditional IRA forces every dollar out as ordinary income, taxed at your top marginal rate. It forces required minimum distribution starting at 73 or 75, whether you need the money or not. Your Roth has 5-year rules, qualified distribution rules, contribution limits. Your 401k has plan-specific withdrawal restrictions and limited investment menus. The brokerage account has none of that. And because it has none of that, it gives you 3 levers that no other account does. Lever 1 is timing. You decide what year a sale happens. You decide what month. You decide what day. Want to push a $200,000 gain into next tax year because this year has high income? Done. Want to accelerate a sale into a low income year to soak up the 0% bracket while it's available? Also done. No other account lets you orchestrate income across calendar years the way a brokerage does. Lever 2 is character. The IRS taxes different kinds of income at completely different rates. Wages, business income, IRA withdrawals, they're all ordinary income with a top rate of 37%. Long-term capital gains and qualified dividends has a top rate of 23.8% when you factor in net investment income and a 0% rate at the bottom. The brokerage account is the only account where the income coming out can be deliberately generated at a favorable rate. Every dollar leaving a traditional IRA is ordinary income, period. Every dollar leaving a brokerage account can be a capital gain at less than half the tax cost. Lever 3, basis. Inside a brokerage account, every share you own has a cost basis attached to it. That's the IRS's record of what you've already paid tax on. When you sell, the basis comes back to you completely tax-free. Only the gain is taxable, and the gain gets the preferential rate. You can also choose which specific shares to sell, raising or lowering the gain on demand. And this is the part nobody talks to you about. When you pass, the basis resets to fair market value, erasing every embedded gain for your heirs. No other account has the concept of basis at all. Timing, character, basis. The IRA is the fuel tank. The Roth is the reserve. The brokerage account is the steering wheel. The only account in your retirement that gives you real-time control over what your tax bill actually looks like. That is why we build the entire withdrawal strategy around it. Quick pause before I go into the execution part. If everything I've said so far has you thinking, I need someone running these numbers on my actual portfolio, not a hypothetical couple in a video, that's exactly what my team does at NavWealth Partners. Here's what you get if you book a call. 30 minutes, screen share. My team plugs your actual numbers, your basis, your IRA, your Social Security claim age, your state, into the same modeling software you're going to see me use here if you stick around. You leave the call with a written tax sequencing plan showing, in actual dollars, what this strategy is worth to you and your family over the rest of your life. Zero cost, zero pressure. Whether you become a client or not, the plan is yours to keep. And here's how this actually plays out in execution. There are 3 coordinated moves. Move 1. Deliberate gain harvesting. Every year you sell appreciated shares from the brokerage account up to the top of the 0% capital gains bracket. You don't sell because you need the cash, you sell to reset the cost basis. Then you immediately buy back the same security. There is no wash sale rule on gains, only on losses. So this is fully legal and fully encouraged by the tax code. The next year your starting cost basis is higher, your embedded gain is smaller, and you've banked a tax-free reset. The second move is strategic Roth conversions in low-income years. Between retirement and when RMDs start, there's a window, often 6, 8, 10 years long. In that window, your ordinary income is low. You use that low-income runway to convert chunks of the traditional IRA into Roth, paying tax at the 12% or 22% bracket instead of the 32 or 35% bracket you'd otherwise hit when RMDs kick in. Move 3 is tax loss harvesting on the downside. When markets drop, we sell losing positions to lock in losses. Those losses offset future gains dollar for dollar with up to $3,000 a year, usable against ordinary income. Every loss harvested is a future gain made tax-free. Those 3 moves executed in coordination are what turn a taxable brokerage account into a tax-free retirement income stream. And to show you what that actually looks like with real numbers, let me walk you through a case study. The most important question this entire framework hangs on isn't do I use the Pseudo-Roth, it's when do I use it? Because here's the catch almost nobody talks about. Long-term capital gain harvesting and Roth conversions are competing for the same tax bracket space. Roth conversions count as ordinary income. They fill up the ordinary income brackets first, long-term capital gains then stack on top of that ordinary income, which means if you're doing big Roth conversions in a given year, you've likely already pushed yourself out of the 0% capital gains bracket. and your tax-free harvest suddenly costs you 15%, sometimes more. You cannot run both engines at full throttle in the same year. You have to choose, and the choice comes down to one number: the size of your pre-tax balance, your traditional IRAs, your 401ks, every pre-tax dollar combined. There are two distinct windows when the Pseudo-Roth works. Window 1 is before or alongside Roth conversions. This is the right window if your pre-tax balance is on the smaller side, typically under about $1.5 million in IRAs and 401ks combined. With a balance that size, you can drain the pre-tax bucket using modest annual conversions that fit inside the 10 or 12% bracket, leaving headroom above for the 0% capital gains harvesting in the same year. Both engines run at the same time, just a low RPM. The math works because nothing is competing for space at the top of the bracket. I typically see this work really well for business owners who spent years reinvesting their money back into their business and started really funding retirement accounts later on in their working years. They might sell their business for $4 to $5 million and have a pre-tax balance around $1 million between them and a spouse entering retirement. We will cover their strategy in depth in a little bit, but before we do, let's talk about the window for more traditional W-2 earners, and that's window 2. And you want to utilize the Pseudo-Roth after Roth conversions are complete. This is the right window if your pre-tax balance is large: $2, $3, $4, $5 million or more in traditional IRAs and 401ks. With a balance that big, the math forces you into the 22%, 24%, even the 32% brackets just to get the conversions done before RMDs start. Every conversion year, your ordinary income is too high to leave any room in the 0% long-term capital gains bracket. So you sequence it deliberately. Aggressive conversions through your retirement gap years, drain the pre-tax bucket down, then flip the switch and harvest gains tax-free from RMD age onward once ordinary income drops back to a manageable level. This might be the corporate executive or the physician who maxed their retirement account every year to shield their high income from high tax brackets and saved a little bit in brokerage accounts on the side each year. Their brokerage might sit around $1 to $2 million, and their retirement accounts could be around 3 to 4. They would want to convert aggressively and to set up their Pseudo-Roth after conversions are completed. So the question is not if you use the Pseudo-Roth, the question is when. And the answer is entirely determined by how much pre-tax money you have to move through the system before the IRS forces your hand with required distributions. This is exactly the kind of decision that has to be modeled out year by year for the rest of your life. Eyeballing it is how people give up six figures. To make this concrete, let me walk you through a case study going over each scenario. These are composites of clients we work with every week. Names are changed, numbers are rounded, but the strategies and the outcomes are real. Bill and Susan, they're both 67, recently retired. And here's their portfolio. Their taxable brokerage account is about $2.4 million. It has a cost basis of $1.4 and an embedded gain of $1 million. Their traditional IRA is worth $1.2 million. They have a smaller Roth. They started near the tail end of their careers. That's worth about $300,000. And they have cash and short-term investments of $100,000. Total investable assets of about $4 million. Social Security is $50,000 combined if they take it right now, and $63,000 if they wait until 70. Their annual spending need, $150,000 after tax. The critical number here is the $1.2 million into the traditional IRA. That's a manageable pre-tax balance, modest, drainable over the retirement gap years with small annual conversions that stay inside the lowest brackets. This is a textbook window 1 scenario, both engines running simultaneously. The default approach here would have them in year 1 taking their Social Security of $50,000. They would do an IRA withdrawal to fund their spending of about $115,000. That's 100% ordinary income. Their federal tax is approximately $14,000 in this instance. Their Roth account, it's untouched and nothing is added to it. Their brokerage embedded gain is still growing untouched. If we were to implement this with the Pseudo-Roth strategy, window 1 would look like this in the first year. Social Security would be delayed. Small IRA withdrawal of about $100,000. Taxable income before realizing gains in this instance would be $64,500. Their withdrawal less their standard deduction is how we're getting that number. They would have room to realize gains of about $34,400. From their brokerage account, they would harvest $82,000 gross, resulting in roughly $34,000 worth of gains realized, so under that threshold number. All those gains, they pay 0% federal tax on them. Federal tax total is approximately $6,000. So to recap, they took out $100,000 from their IRA and $75,000 from their brokerage for a total of $175,000. They spent $150,000 of it and paid taxes of $6,000. This left them with about $17,000 to reinvest back into their portfolio at a higher cost basis for next year. And I want to spend some time here going over the tax implications of all this. I also want to show you how this interplays with the enhanced senior deduction that is available through 2028. So let me share my screen and walk you through the tax calculations. Okay, so what we're going to walk through here is the two different scenarios under window 1 as to how this couple can take out their money. So we have the default scenario here on the left-hand side of the screen, and we have them on the scenario 2 side here actually using window 1 to their advantage. So what we're going to want to do, and we'll walk through this side by side, and we'll go over a report for each different scenario, what's actually happening here. So in the default scenario, remember they're taking IRA distributions of about $115,000, and their gross Social Security, because they've taken their Social Security at this point, is about $50,000. Because the provisional income number is above $44,000, they're going to be taxed on 85% of their Social Security benefit. So the taxable portion of their Social Security is $42,500, and where that's going to add to their IRA distribution, what's going to be their eventual AGI, or adjusted gross income number. Now, we also have on the right-hand side here something different. So we have IRA distributions of $100,000. So that's what they're taking out of their IRA to meet a portion of their spending needs. Now, where this is different is we're not going to take Social Security if we're going to use window 1 or use the window before we start taking RMDs as the Pseudo-Roth window here. So we're not taking Social Security. We're going to delay that because that's just unnecessarily filling up their bracket. But where we're different too is when it comes to Schedule D, where we're taking income in terms of capital gains. So remember, this couple had capacity for a little bit more than $34,000 of capital gains that could be had completely tax-free. For just simplicity, we put in $34,000 even here. This frees up about $75,000 to $80,000 worth of capital for them. So when we look at their IRA distribution is $100,000 plus another $75,000 to $80,000 worth of capital, they're going to have $175,000 to $180,000 to spend from and then pay taxes on. And we'll get to how the taxes are different here. But they've only realized $34,000 worth of gains. So as we scroll down, total income, and this is adjusted gross income for this couple when they're not using this window to their advantage, is a little over $157,000. And then it's $134,000 if they are using window 1. There's no Schedule 1 or above the line deductions here. For simplicity, you would want to model those in, and we could talk about those if you wanted to meet and have like an actual discussion about your actual situation. For simplicity, though, we're not going to put them in here. This is how we're getting their adjusted gross income number. Then they have their standard deduction and itemized deductions here. We're just assuming they take the standard deduction, which for anybody over the age of 65 and a married couple, $35,500 a year. I'm going to actually drill into the actual scenarios here. So under the default scenario, we're just going to generate a report. And this summarizes really nicely what's going on. So their total income, $157,500, no above line deduction. So that AGI number stays the same. They're taking their standard deductions. It means they're taxed on about just shy of $111,000, $110,900. And following this setup, they actually owe $13,822. So now I know what you're saying. Well, if we take $35,500 subtracted from the AGI number, we get a number that's a little bit bigger. It should be roughly $122,000 of taxable income. Well, from now until 2028, there's actually something that's really nice. It's the enhanced senior deduction. So if your modified adjusted gross income is below $150,000, you receive a $12,000 benefit as a married couple. So $6,000 for each person in the couple. So this couple is a little bit above that adjusted gross income number. So they're phased out on a small portion of their enhanced senior deduction. That's where this taxable income number is driven a little bit lower. So they are receiving that. So what's happening for this couple is they're dipping into the 22% bracket now. So they're taxed at a marginal rate of 10% on the first $24,800 worth of income. The next roughly $76,000 of income is taxed at 12%. And then they tip over by about $10,000 into the 22%. That's how we're coming up with their tax bill. They are below the $218,000 Medicare threshold because their modified adjusted gross income is at $157,500 number. So not paying any Medicare premium surcharges. And this is how we're calculating the taxability of their Social Security. Again, provisional income's above $44,000. And so that's going to make their taxable percentage about 85%.
at 85%. So 85% of their $50,000 benefits can be added to their income. So that's how we're getting it for the couple following the default approach. So you might be thinking, $14,000, a little bit less than $14,000 federal tax. That's not all that bad. But let's just see if we were to structure this a little bit differently, what it looks like. So this is for the couple who's actually using window one. Now you'll see here total income, or what they're claiming their income on, is just the $100,000 IRA distribution plus the $34,000 of capital gains realized. So their adjusted gross income is $134,000. They're able to take their standard deduction of $35,500, and because their adjusted gross income is below $150,000, they qualify for the full enhanced senior deduction. So we take this enhanced senior deduction, add it to their standard deduction. This drives down their adjusted gross income to this taxable income number of $86,500, and they owe federal tax of just under $6,000. Here's how it hits their marginal brackets. The 10% bracket is completely filled up, so they're paying $2,480 in tax there, and then they're only dipping into the 12% bracket by $27,700, which results in another $3,300 worth of taxes. So this couple is paying only taxes of $6,000 because their capital gains aren't being taxed at all, because their taxable income number of $86,500 is below the $98,900 worth of the taxable income threshold, which means all $34,000 that we realized they don't pay any tax on. They also have capacity here for roughly another, $12,400 worth of gains that they could realize completely tax-free. We do want to be cognizant, though, to make sure that they can realize all of that and not waive any portion of the senior deduction. So if they add that $12,000 and change to this adjusted gross income number, they're still below $150,000. So this couple actually has room to realize more gains on top of what they've already done. So this is a very good start, but really we could take this to the next level, realize more gains, reset basis elsewhere in the portfolio, and drive an even more tax efficient outcome in the future. And this is how we would go about using window one for this couple.
So we just walked through how to achieve year one savings of roughly $8,000. But the dollar savings is only part of the win. The Pseudo-Roth approach is doing three things at once. It's chipping the IRA balance down with annual conversions, neutralizing future required distributions before they ever start. It's growing the Roth tax-free for them and for their heirs. And it's harvesting the embedded brokerage gain at 0%, resetting basis higher every single year. Both engines running, low RPM, sustainable for 2 decades. Run that strategy from age 67 through age 90, and the cumulative federal tax savings after accounting for tax savings remaining invested lands around $500,000 depending on market returns and tax law. By the end of their lives, most of the original $1 million embedded gain has been harvested away completely tax-free, and what remains in the brokerage passes to their kids with a stepped-up basis, meaning that the IRS never gets $1 of that gain, ever. That's window one. Now let's look at a couple in a completely different position. Bob and Sarah, still both 67 and just retired. Their portfolio looks very different. Taxable brokerage account is around $3.5 million, a cost basis of $2 million, and an embedded gain of $1.5 million. And their traditional IRA is $2.8 million. They also have a smaller Roth worth $400,000. And then they have cash on hand of about $300,000. So total investable assets hover around $7 million. Social Security for them is $60,000 combined, and the annual spending need for them is about $150,000 after tax. The critical number here is the $2.8 million in the traditional IRA. Left alone, growing at even modest market returns, that balance becomes over $4 million by the time RMDs kick in at 73, forcing them into the 24% and 32% brackets every year for the rest of their lives, on every dollar they no longer get to control. This is window two, conversions first, harvesting second. Sequenced, not simultaneously. So phase one is ages 67 through 72. This is the conversion phase. And the goal is not to convert all of the funds. The goal is to convert just enough to lower the burden of the RMD when they start at 73. For the first 4 years, it likely makes sense to convert into the 24% bracket and pay some IRMA surcharges until Social Security starts. If they target $300,000 of withdrawals for those first 4 years and then max the 22% bracket from there on out, they will decrease the IRA to about $1.7 million. At age 73, when they'll be forced to take a $65,000 withdrawal as their first required distribution. That takes us to phase 2 at age 73 and onward. That's the harvest phase. At step 1, they take their required distribution and Social Security of $60,000 and have adjusted gross income of $116,000. Then factor in their standard deduction of $35,500 and they have taxable income of $80,500 at that point, leaving them with roughly $18,000 of room to work with. Step 2 is to use the gains harvesting strategy to harvest the $18,000 if gains are completely tax-free. At this point, gains are likely 60% of the overall non-qualified portfolio, which means they're realizing about $18,000 worth of gains and freeing up $30,000 of capital for them to spend. Following this strategy, they will pay roughly $9,000 in federal taxes, but they would still have an income shortfall at this point because their Social Security is $60,000 plus $65,000 from the IRA plus $30,000 from their brokerage, less than $9,000 in taxes, is only $146,000 in spendable income, which is short of their $150,000 goal. That takes us to step 3, and this is more dynamic now. They can fund that $4,000 gap from their Roth completely tax-free or dip back into brokerage and pay capital gains taxes on any additional withdrawals. With either option, federal taxes do not increase much past $9,500 total for the year. Compound that out over the next 15 years, and they'll pay roughly $150,000 to $200,000 in taxes, depending on market returns and tax law changes. Had they followed the default path, done no conversions, taken Social Security early and only pulled what they needed, they would have paid well over $500,000 in federal taxes over that same 15-year period. Now I have to give you the other side, because the strategy can blow up. And I see it blow up regularly when people try to DIY it off a YouTube video, including this one. Mistake number 1 is not knowing what taxable income is. Taxable income is what actually matters, but many investors don't know how to calculate it. Taxable income is the sum of your income sources, known as adjusted gross income, less your standard or itemized deductions. If you don't know that, you will always be optimizing for the wrong number. Mistake number 2, IRMA and Social Security taxation. This is the trap that nobody warns you about. You can technically owe $0 in federal tax on a capital gain and still trigger thousands of dollars in additional Medicare premium surcharges through IRMA and push more of your Social Security into the taxable column. A tax-free gain can quietly cost you $4,000 a year in Medicare premiums 2 years later. Mistake number 3, wrong lot selection. If you bought a stock or a fund in multiple purchases over the years, you have multiple cost basis lots. The default tax treatment, first in, first out, is almost always the worst possible outcome, assuming the market has grown. You need to use specific lot identification and choose which shares to sell deliberately. The difference between FIFO and optimized lot selection can be 5 or 6 figures over retirement. You also need to be very careful in realizing gains. Short-term gains always count as ordinary income if they are in excess of your losses. So be sure not to realize the wrong kind of gain, or you will pay more than your fair share. And then mistake number 4 is the net investment income tax. Once your modified adjusted gross income crosses $250,000 for a married couple, an additional 3.8% net investment income tax kicks in on the gain. That can quietly wipe out the benefit of staying in the lower bracket if you're not modeling around it. The strategy is simple to describe. The execution requires actual tax software, actual modeling, and someone who's done it 1,000 times. This is not a place to learn by trial and error. Every mistake is a permanent dollar lost. The strategy works for a very specific person. Let me tell you exactly who that is. You have between $2 and $10 million in investable assets. At least a third of that, ideally more, sits in a taxable brokerage account with meaningful embedded gains. You're within 10 years of retirement on either side. You're going to live off this portfolio for the next 20 to 30 years, and you care about leaving something to your kids or to causes that matter to you. If that's you, the Pseudo-Roth approach isn't a nice to have. It's the difference between a comfortably wealthy retirement and a generationally wealthy one. We're talking conservatively, a 7-figure difference in after-tax outcomes over 30 years on the same exact portfolio. Not from picking better stocks, not from beating the market, not from working longer, from just tax sequencing alone. If you want to see what this looks like applied to your actual numbers, your accounts, your basis, your Social Security claim age, your state of residence, that is exactly the analysis we run for new clients at NavWealth Partners. The link to book a complimentary tax sequencing analysis is in the description. My team will plug your real portfolio into our modeling software and show you in actual dollars what the Pseudo-Roth approach is worth to your family over the rest of your life. If this video helps you see your brokerage account in a new light, do me one favor, hit subscribe. I'm putting out one of these every week, and the next videos in this series are going to cover the Roth conversion ladder and how to size your conversions through the retirement gap years, the IRMA cliff, and the 4 income thresholds that can quietly cost you $20,000 a year in Medicare premiums, and the one withdrawal sequencing mistake I see in roughly 70% of new client portfolios, the one that's almost always ready to cost them a 6-figure tax bill they didn't have to pay. Don't let the IRS plan your retirement for you. I'll see you in the next video.